Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us on this introductory session for Evolution MX. Designed purely as a brief introduction and overview of the product, we have a number of other webinars and recordings that we can provide you with, which will look at more detail on some of the areas I'll just briefly touch on this session. Integrity Software are the providers of Evolution MX. Listed down the left-hand side on my system here are all the potential modules that are available to the Evolution MX system. The solid orange icon represents what we call the core system. So that's the out-of-the-box offering. Those come to you as part of the basic system. And to briefly explain what each of those are, we've got the contract ledger, which sits at the core of our system. We're not an account system with a bolted-on job costing or contract management system. We effectively are a contract management system surrounding which are the accounting ledgers. So the core or the focus of our system is all about the contract ledger, the job costing, the projects side of things. And it's there where you'll set up new jobs. You'll be able to record budgetary information. We can import that, if you like, from an Excel source that may have been arrived at in Excel itself, or as an export from one of the leading estimating systems. Your contract will sit there allowing for costs to be posted to it directly or more likely through the other ledgers, including purchase ledger, subcontractors and payroll, as well as the sales coming in through revenue in the form of invoices and or applications and valuations. So at a glance, you'll be able to see on a contract how much it's cost you, how much it should have cost you, and what you've earned in terms of profit, but also any other areas such as retention, discounts and so forth. On top of that, then you get the traditional accounts ledgers in terms of the purchase ledger. That's for your accounts payable. That's your suppliers would be set up in there, the non-subcontractors basically. And you'd be able to there deal with the invoices received from them. We have got an optional extra. So anything you see with a hollow icon is provided to you as an optional extra. It doesn't have to be there as part of the system. It can be either initially or you can subsequently add it on. An invoice register is a way of being able to deal with invoices that you receive via email without the need to have to print them off or scan them or barcode them or do anything manually with them. They stay electronically and allow you to use the image that's been presented to you to make the posting on screen, either manually using our entry-level option for invoice register, or as a top-up, we've got something called OCR, and I'll be touching on both of those just in a few moments' time. So the purchase invoicing can be the first thing that the system sees, or it could have come from a purchase order. So we'll be able to match against purchase orders should that be a requirement. Now, deliberately separate from the purchase ledger, we find the subcontractors. The subcontractors is where you'll set up anybody who's potentially liable under CIS. It covers all of the requirements for CIS for the UK, but also for RCT for the Republic of Ireland. On the CIS side of things, we've got the ability to handle a verification process that allows to send the UTR information off to HMRC and return with the result without having to go via the website. It'll also allow for the submission of the monthly return, or the CIS 300 as it's called, allowing you to communicate directly with HMRC on that front. And also the ability to produce monthly statement runs via email to your subcontractors, detailing to them what they've been paid and what they've had deducted. Now, the subcontractors being its own ledger means we can not only do that, but we can also provide information on things like public liability insurance details and warn you or nag at you if you're approaching or have encountered an expiration on somebody's public liability insurance details. But also any other skills and certifications can be dealt with as well. We do also cover for RCT for the Republic of Ireland. I won't be looking at that in any detail. We've got some specialist webinars on that subject, should that be of any interest to you. But suffice to say, we are online with Ross in the same way as we are with HMRC for the Republic of Ireland. Okay, now with subcontractors, it doesn't matter whether they are labour only or bona fide, whether they provide you with an invoice or an application, self-bill or anything like that. We can deal with all different manners of subcontractor interaction that you may come across. Within the sales, we've got an option to configure that the way that you want it to work. So rather than just say, here's an invoice and this is what it does, or this is what an application does, you've got the scope for building your own methodology as to how the sales is going to be recognized. So in other words, is an invoice going to be cumulative? Is it going to be movement? Is it going to have retention on it? Is there going to be discount on it? Is it going to be the tax point, or is the tax point going to be taken care of at the point of cash receipt? You may involve applications on some contracts or all contracts. You can choose whether that application is what we call a memorandum figure. In other words, it doesn't affect your debtors or your turnover, but it does show as a figure on the contract against which you can report. So you can see that you've applied for 10,000, for example, the clients come back with a certificate for 8,000. You may just record that as a valuation entry, or you may raise an invoice for it. We don't dictate to you and say, this is what you've got to do, or this is how you've got to fit in with our system. We'll have a consultative approach with you and say, well, how do you want it to work? Okay, and that can be the same for all contracts, or it can differ contract by contract, customer by customer, your choice. The payroll is part of the core system as well. That is our own payroll, not third party, and that deals with weekly and monthly payrolls. It also allows for costing information to be placed through the payroll, and that could be in the form of timesheets that you receive manually. Maybe you enter those onto the payroll against the appropriate employees for the certain jobs, or we can import information. So either in an Excel source that you've got because you prepared that based on the receipt of manual timesheets, or maybe you've had an output from a time and attendance system. We also have our own offerings in terms of timesheet portal, which would allow for basically the operators to fill in their own timesheets on a mobile device, and then subject to authorization, those could then be imported. Again, that's a subject of a separate webinar, which I'll be happy to share with you. The payroll, as well as the subcontractors, will be kept up to date for all the legislation requirements. So in terms of PAYE RTI information, the pensions reform, the subcontractor side for the reverse charge, for example, and also more widely in terms of VAT for making tax digital. That appears within your nominal ledger, incidentally, within the VAT section, simply because the nominal ledger is going to collect all the information from the other ledgers, as well as allow for journal entries to involve some VAT elements as well. And it's the nominal ledger where you'll be able to report upon your company performance to trial balance level or onwards through to profit and loss and balance sheet, all achieved through the central nominal ledger or general ledger. The final one, the core system, then the cash book, sits at the very end of the core list. That allows for postings which haven't gone through the other ledgers, petty cash payments and the like, as well as your bank reconciliation, whether that's a manual ticking off exercise or whether you choose to download a statement from your bank. So the core system, the 7, is your starting point. Optionals, then we've touched on one or two within the core system already. Document management is another key optional, although really it's not something that most people take the opportunity to ignore. It's almost 100% take up in terms of the modules that people would take on board. And what document management basically does is it allows for the system to store the documents that you are creating. So as you raise a sales invoice or a purchase order or a payment certificate or a payslip, document management takes care of the electronic storing and filing of that document. So it's retrievable within the transaction to which it relates, whoever's accessing it from wherever they happen to be. So a payment certificate, for example, raised against a subcontractor would be visible against a subcontractor inquiry, but also through the contract to which it relates and also through the nominal ledger. So your auditors will love the fact that they can get hold of all the documentary evidence through the general ledger, the nominal ledger. Document management also deals with the storage of the incoming documents. So the emails received in terms of invoicing from your suppliers and subcontractors, once dealt with, will be filed away and stored through document management and accessible again in the same way throughout the rest of the system. But you can also use document management on a more ad hoc basis, where you come across the requirement to store a relevant file. You know, maybe a PDF file, it might be an Excel file, a Word document, a TIFF scan file. That you want to store against a contract or against a supplier or against a subcontractor. So whether that be a document you've received or you've created a scan of a driving license or a passport or whatever it may be, you can drag and drop that against any area of the system. And that just helps to sort of bolster the library of information document management is holding, all part of your Evolution MX data, included as part of the backup and accessible to all users wherever they happen to be. Also included as optional modules or key optionals would be purchase orders. That allows for the creation of not only materials orders, but also subcontractor orders. Materials orders using a product and price list of your choosing. That's something you can either create manually yourself in as much detail as you wish, or we've got the option to import price lists from suppliers, allowing for you to have a library of relevant products and pricing to be used by the different suppliers. And that can be created initially, but also on subsequent price updates, you can just refresh the pricing. Subcontractors work similarly, though maybe probably not in terms of a product library, more in terms of a work category, to say you're working on a day works or supply of materials or wherever it may be, on different categories of work. Both types of orders will create you a committed cost visibility on the contract. So that's an important thing to point. It's an early visibility of the fact that you have committed to orders from your or with your suppliers and subcontractors. Okay, and they'll be visible on the contract, which you'll look at in a second. The hollow icon next to plant indicates that that is optional available if you have got the plant module. Now, our plant module will allow you to manage your own items of plant in terms of tracking their whereabouts and even cross-charging them to contracts, but also give you the third option within purchase ordering, which allows for the hiring in of plant hire from a third party. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. That is a subject of separate webinars, but essentially it gives you a more flexible way of raising purchase orders for plant, because as we all know, plant isn't necessarily as straightforward as consumer consumables. You may have something on hire or think it's going to be on hire for 7 days. It may end up being a whole month or two. So you've got the ability to have effectively an open-ended purchase order that you can charge against until the hire is finished. But again, that is subject of a separate webinar. Other modules do exist as part of the optional setup if you want to. I won't go into any detail on any of those, but if anything does take your fancy and you want some more information on them, please do let us know. Over and above the menu access you've got, you do also have ability to access the system on a slightly different way. So rather than having to go through the menu, and incidentally the menus are trimmed down to suit the access requirements of the individual users, so not everybody's not going to see everything necessarily. But as an alternative, you might choose to have a dashboard view. Now, dashboards are a great way of breathing life into the system, really, and allowing for the relevant information to be displayed to you in the form that you want. So this example dashboard, and it is purely an example, looks at all purchase ledger information. But each of these individual tiles has been configured through the use of the setup option there. So if we look at one of the particular tiles here on the bar chart on the center right there, if I click on that, that's where I've told it to go and use purchase transaction information as a source for that tile and to display it in the style that I'm calling creditor's tile. It may be one of a dozen or so different ways of looking at the same information, where it might be graphical, it might be a table of figures, it may allow for drill down, for example. So you've got lots of different ways of how that information is presented in summary form in the first place. I have enabled drill down on that particular area. So from that bar chart, if I was to click onto it, it'll take me into the underlying information. It's the same purchase transaction information, but this time I'm choosing the variant which I'm calling supplier trans list, which is going to give me the information for all suppliers, but grouped into supplier order and ranked by balance order. If I were to expand upon a particular supplier, I'll then be able to see the outstanding details for that particular supplier. And it's purely the outstanding because I've asked it to filter and say, don't show me all the history. I only want to see what's outstanding. So show me what constitutes the debt that I have with them. Behind any one of those, you're able to interrogate further to be able to easily retrieve what could be a documentary evidence sitting behind. And this is an example of an invoice that's come through the invoice register, where it was received via email, you've processed it, and the system's kept a copy of it, in this case against the supplier, but equally against the contract and also the nominal. So dashboards can be a preferred route of access. You can make it your default, and it can be configured to include whatever elements you want. It doesn't have to all be purchase ledger. There could be a mixture of different information across the system. Can also be used to provide important reminders. So if we use the subcontractors as an example here, we could be saying here that we want to be reminded, top left, that we've got 15 subcontractors whose public liability insurance is going to expire or has expired within the next month. If you click on that, you'll be taken down into the detail of those 15, where you can see who they are, make contact with them. You can also freely alter the information that's being shown. So if you'd rather have information on there for a telephone number or some other contact information, you could easily pick up and show additional fields on there and then save it as your preferred way of presenting that information. Okay, and dashboard tiles can present whatever information you want as reminders or as relevant statistical or financial information. Let's spend a little time going in through and having a look at what we said at the very beginning is going to be a key part of our system, and that is the ability to manage your individual contracts. So within a contract inquiry function here, I can inquire upon a particular contract of my choosing. At the top there, I've got the option to put in a contract code. If I just browse, we'll be able to see a list of all of my contracts. And a contract number is whatever you want it to be. It could be numbers, it could be letters, it could be an abbreviation of the client or the customer or the type of contract it is. And it could also form a hierarchy. So we've got this ability to handle what we call main job with subjobs. So 1002 is a main job, beneath which we've got a number of subjobs. And a subjob is a job in its own right. It's got its own cost, its own budget, its own profitability, and it could represent a different plot, a block, a unit, a phase, or a stage of a contract where you need to keep that information separate, but you also want to see the overall picture reflected to the top. So in the hierarchy, 1002 at the top will collect all of the cost and budget and sales information from each of the subjobs beneath it. As you can see, it's optional. You don't have to use it. You can use it on occasions, as I've done just in a couple of occasions. Every other job I've got is a standalone job. So when you select the job that you want, and you've got full comprehensive searching ability to find a job based upon its number, its location, its postcode, whatever it might be. So load the job up that you want to see, and as a summary, you'll be presented with information on the left-hand side that reflects the cost and budget, and on the right-hand side, we're seeing the sales and revenue. Now, the cost information is shown in what we call cost head groups, and these would be your choice of headings. Don't have to have the terminology that I've used here or have the number that I've got here. You can have as many as you wish. So we've got cost, actual cost, alongside which we've got budget. And at the bottom, we've got the total. So 34.5 grand's worth of cost versus 72.5 grand's worth of budget. Now, that budget is being represented by what I've got displayed here as original estimate in the center top. And if I click on that, we can see that we haven't just got one budget, we've actually got 3 others. And if I switch to one of the others, the figures will change to show you a more accurate reflection of what I am now calling latest budget. So you can have as many budget headings as you want. You're not limited to 4. You can call them what you like. And as I mentioned before, you can import them very easily from an Excel source. So a bill of quantities in Excel, we can easily import to provide you with an update of one of these existing headings or to create a new heading. And again, that's the budget import as a subject of a separate webinar, which we're happy to go through with you or give you a link to. So not only did we provide you with the summary information on this front screen, if I want to go into the detail behind, then I just switch to the cost tab, where I can see initially the same information as displayed on that front screen with my cost and budget. But now I can expand into the level of detail that I want to go into. So expanding upon materials, which I'm prefixing with an MA code, just out of choice, I can go into individual codes. So these are your cost heads. There's as many or as few of them as you wish. Some people just like lump everything together under materials. But the more granular you can be, the more accurate you're going to get in terms of information for reporting and comparison. So if we consider the scenario we saw initially, where we've got 10.5 grand's worth of actual cost, the budget is 14.5 grand. So all looks well in terms of materials. But because I've applied this more granular level, as we expand, we can see further down on one of the specific cost heads, patio doors, for example, we've spent 1,200. The budget was only 306. So we've gone over on that particular area of the material spend, which is important because we provided that extra level of detail, and we would therefore we would have missed that ordinarily if we'd have just looked at the materials total. Now, because that is the case, we've got a breach of budget on this particular line. I might want to interrogate that particular line in more detail. So just by double clicking it, once highlighted, you'll be able to see all the cost transactions that relate to that particular cost head on this particular contract, including the source as to whether it's come through the purchase ledger or the subcontractors, and the ability to see the transaction beneath. That's another way of getting to that same document that we saw from the dashboard. Within the contract this time, we're able to see the details of the posting and also documentary evidence sitting behind it, which would be, of course, the copy of the invoice that came in via email that's now been stored and made accessible to other areas of the system. Okay, now obviously you're not going to necessarily just be interested in a particular area of cost, but so if you wanted to expand your selection to the whole range of costs on this particular contract, just go to the very top where the job description or job name is shown, double click there, and you'll now be shown all costs. That's all costs for all ledgers, subcontractors, payroll, all sorts of areas have come together, indicating a screen of information of your choosing. So you've got an ability here to use your right click to modify that, where you may want to include more or fewer fields or in a different order. Now that allows you to similarly drill down into details beneath. So if I went into a payment certificate here, for example, that was raised against a subcontractor, I'd be able to see the details of the posting and also the document beneath. This time it's a document that was created by yourselves and probably emailed out to your subcontractors. This is an example of what our standard out-of-the-box payment certificate could look like. It's your choice as to whether you keep it that way. We'll certainly add the logo, your company logo, to the top left-hand corner, but we can make some fine-tuning changes for you as well. Now, that's all well and good looking at a particular transaction. If you'd like to now take that information externally, then you have the option to be able to use right-click and just say copy to Excel. And that's a great way of being able to share the information externally to somebody who's maybe not got access to your Evolution MX system and needs to have access to it through a different source. So as an Excel file, it's now populated that with a nicely formatted Excel record. You've got dates as dates, values as values. It doesn't remove a 0 off the front of a contract number, assuming it's a number. It takes it as a numeric text. And so that's ready to share information. Okay, back from the main screen, we can look back to the summary. We saw about costs, we saw about budgets. Now what I'm going to do is just switch the view, so using the total option in the center of the screen to reflect the value of outstanding purchase orders. So this is the same 34.5 grand as actual cost, but now we've got 5,700s being represented through the sum value of purchase orders. So another 3 grand's worth of subby orders, 2,700's worth of material orders. So in addition to the 34 grand, add on the 5.7, you've now got committed costs of 40,000 plus on this particular contract. So you've got that early visibility of purchase orders. And if you click on the orders button towards the bottom, we'll be able to see the detail of all purchase orders in summary form initially, line by line, one line per purchase order. So 385 on that one, none of which has been delivered or invoiced. If I double click again, I'll now see the product detail that was put into that purchase order, showing me the individual product codes, quantities, prices, depending on your selection of the screen here, and also a copy of the document, which could be a copy of the purchase order that was held by the system. Okay, that would have been an image of what was sent out to your supplier. That could have gone on its own. It could have gone with accompanying terms and conditions. It could have gone with additional documents that you chose to put out to the supplier, maybe a copy of their quote or a site plan or whatever it might be. Now, purchase orders isn't the subject of today. Again, we've got a far more detailed section on that, which we'd be happy to share with you. But for the time being, we're just going to refer to purchase orders that have been put on there, showing that they've got a committed cost. And I'm going to use one of those in a moment when we do a purchase ledger invoice posting and do the matching. Okay, other things that you can do on the contract summary could be look at the cash position view. So I've got an ability here to be able to see my costs, but now the value of costs that have actually been paid for. So I paid out 22.5 grand of the 34 grand, leaving me a liability or exposure to the tune of 12 grand. And because we are a joined up contract costing and accounting system, we've got the one source of information. So as a contract cost is posted and then paid by the accounts, the contract cost knows about it and it just updates it and shows you that. And you could get down to the level of detail showing every single transaction and which ones have been paid and which haven't. Now, if you prefer, you have an alternative way as to how you look at this cost information. Now, for this, I'm just going to switch to a different job just to give you an idea. And this is something that will either be totally relevant to you or maybe not at all. So on this particular job, I've got the same idea as the previous one, it's just higher figures, so 341 grand, split down between the same area of costs that we saw earlier. But on this one, I've chosen to also have an option for operational analysis. Now, as soon as I switch to it, this is going to be a house builder terminology. So we're not saying it has to be. This is reflecting the activities, the stages, the operations, what you do on a job. So we're saying here that the roof, for example, has had 18 grand spent versus a £298,000 budget. If we switch to the costs, then we're able to expand upon that to show the detail, perhaps down to sub-operations. So what went into the roof structure in terms of activities, beneath which you start to now revert back to your traditional resources. So 11 grand's worth of materials. So it's up to you whether that is of any interest. It requires obviously extra coding. At the point of input, you need to say what the operation code is going to be at the source of a purchase order or a purchase into this invoice transaction. So just another thing to think about. Over on the right-hand side, we've got access to the sales, and this is displayed in the format that you want to, relevant to the sales activity that's been designed around this particular contract. So we are allowing for applications, for example, 740 grand's worth of applications have been placed against this contract. My contract sum expectation at the top, 750, so I've nearly achieved everything that I was hoping to in terms of billing. In terms of what's been certified, only 650. So the terminology and the maths that's being performed is up to you. This reflects how applications are put on the system as memorandum, and then a certificate valuation is posted rather than an invoice for a different figure. We don't have to raise an invoice on this particular contract, but if you want to, you can do. We're taking care of any VAT liability at the point of cash receipt. So the tax point is moved to the point of posting cash. So you could have something looking as sophisticated and in depth as this if you want to do on a particular job, but you've also got the ability for other jobs to have a more straightforward view. So this one here, for example, would only reflect an overall order value or contract sum expected, and then how much has been invoiced, credited or received in cash to date. So you can have either of those, neither of those, somewhere in between, or multiple variations of. Now, another way of looking at your contract information could be through the use of dashboards. So rather than going in through the purchase ledger, I'm just going to go in through contract list and be able to fire up an example of a dashboard for a particular contract. Now, this is filtering all information now relevant to contract or job 0737. So an alternative view to what we just saw through the contract inquiry, but same ability to drill into the cost transactions if you wanted to be able to see what's been going on. again, into patio doors if you wanted to, and a much quicker and easier way of being able to retrieve using the paperclip link a copy of that document. But also in here, I'll just show you how you've got access to all documents for this contract. A contract documents tile on the dashboard. If I click into that, that's going to show me a neatly organized summary of all the different document types I've got for this contract. Within purchase order section, every purchase order that's ever been raised, whether it's a material or a subcontractor order, it'll be stored within that section. Other sections of your choice could be added to collect other types of documents that the system is generating, but also other more ad hoc documents. So things like photographs, for example. Evolution MX itself has got nothing to do with the creation of the photograph, but it recognizes you might want to store those against your contract. So you can have as many additional headings as this, storing documents that come to you in a pre-existing form, allowing you to be able to just copy them into the contract. And that's exactly what it does. So if I just park that screen out of the way for the moment, go and grab a file from my desktop and bring it over onto the open window, I'm now introducing a new file for that contract, ground floor plan PDF, and I'm going to put it into the section of my choice. This would be your library heading choices for drawings in this case. That's not just creating a link to that document, that's actually copying it in and putting it into your Evolution MX database. So you've now got a copy of that PDF file within your contract ledger. And you can do that similarly, dragging and dropping any document of electronic nature against any area of the system, whether it's a contract, an employee, a subcontractor, or whatever. Other sections there will illustrate that we could just be recording our site forms, health and safety, and other types of forms in the manner of some things like risk assessments, RAMs, or accidents, incidents logs that have been completed through some other means. But it does illustrate how we've also got the ability to have a forms module. Again, not the subject of today's section necessarily, but this could be made available to engineers on handheld devices where they can collate an incident or accident form on site, take pictures, signatures, maybe get it subject to approval, and then have that come through into and get stored against the contract. So again, the subject of separate webinars, if that's of any interest to you. What I just wanted to do then show you, as I promised, is how we can post an invoice using the email receipt methodology. So to do that, I'll go into my invoice register. I'll fire up a dashboard which summarizes the activity that I've got available to me or that I'm expected to do with inside invoice register. And this allows us to be able to call up an outstanding list of items that have been received into an email address. Now, this is just a brief introduction to the invoice register to give you an idea of what it does. Again, it is a subject in more detail of separate webinars. But in essence, what it allows you to do, either manually or automatically, this is the manual exercise where I'm going to pick up on a particular invoice here and allow for it to be posted on the system. So I can choose the one that I want, whichever one it might be, and be able to select it and make the posting. So there's the image represented on the left-hand side. The right-hand side gives me access to the input. So I could be recording here who the supplier is, the dates, the reference numbers, okay, a total value including VAT. And then if I've got a purchase order, I could select that to be the match basis on this particular entry. So there's purchase order 156 I found. So the system will go off, retrieve that information. You're seeing that the invoice is for 400 net with 80 quid's worth of VAT. If I go to show cost allocation, we'll see what the system has retrieved in relation to that purchase order. And we'll see now at the bottom, there are only 3 lines on that purchase order and their sum value comes to a difference of 15 quid. So there was a line difference on the purchase order as opposed to the invoice. If we look more closely, we can see delivery charges was included on the invoice and wasn't on the order. But it might be that the quantities or prices differed on the invoice to what was being presented on the order. So we have the ability to change anything at the bottom or to add a line to say we're going to put on that line as a direct cost against the contract for the remaining 15 quid. That takes me out to allocate back to 0. Now, it may be something you're happy to do yourself. It may be that you need to place it on query, in which case you can gain the approval from somebody else. They just need to be set up as an email recipient. So they don't have to be a user of Evolution MX. They could be, and maybe if they're going to be a regular approver, but they could just be an ad hoc user who would then receive an email with an attached copy of this document to then be able to reply to so that you can handle the further required posting. So that's available to you. Surrounding all of that, you might just want to put on a little note. So electronically scribble on it to say that was missed off the PO. And that will stay now as an overlay on top of that invoice as we look at it later. If I then submit, That's just going to make sure that everything agrees, and we'll be able to do the posting through to the system. Okay, we'll leave that one as it is for the moment. We've then got the ability to be able to see what would have happened on that particular invoice. Okay, there's something preventing me from doing that particular one. But in the same way as we saw earlier, we'd be able to retrieve that image now that it's been posted through the system against the supplier, against the contract, against the nominal ledger. I just wanted to quickly show you the alternative route, which is the OCR route. And this is where some of the hard work could have been done for you, some of the repetitive work. So these invoices come in the same way. They get sent away for validation or verification, checking against your supplier base, because it needs to know who this supplier is. It checks it by looking at the VAT number and then comparing that against your supplier database to be able to make a suggestion to you to say this is supplier PL001. The rest of the information on the right-hand side has then been filled in for me based upon the information it's found over here. And if I click on any field, it'll show me where the information's been found. If I'm not happy with where it's found it and I need to redirect it to an alternative, you can just tell it, use that field instead. Okay, and if that is going to be a permanent override that you want the system to observe next time it comes across a PL001 invoice, then you can use the training tick at the bottom, and that will just tell the system to use that next time. So the information is found in terms of values as well. The goods, the VAT, and also any purchase order could be recognized on the system as well. And if that is provided, then the show cost allocation will have found that purchase order and the matching lines and will leave you with nothing else to allocate. So if everything is to plan, then there's nothing more required on that particular invoice. Of course, if there are any differences or discrepancies, you've got the place on query, you've got the ability to add notes to it. But it's provided you with a shortcut way of being able to get that information to the system, because it's read the information and shown it on the right hand side, subject to your final approval. Okay, so I appreciate that was quite a quick overview of your Evolution MX system. We're happy to take any follow-up questions that you might have. If you just want to put them on a follow-up email or on a notes section, then we'll address those for you. And as I say, if there's anything else we can help you with, we'll be happy to give you links to other videos and other recordings to go into more detail, or of course entertain meeting you on a one-to-one basis. Thanks very much for your attendance today. Thank you. Bye now.